Hey, everybody. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Brusuelas, and with Joe Carlton, we host the Thursday Checkdown, where each week we try to have guests to come in, and each week we try to have guests come in.
You all right there, Rick?
And I'm sorry about that. Each week we have guests come in and talk to us about strategy and about football, and all with the hope of helping you, the fantasy football fan, be better at fantasy football, but also have more fun in the process. Tonight, we are super excited about the guests we have. Dan Clasgens is our guest. He'll be coming to us. He's with Sirius XM Radio, and hopefully we'll have a chance to not only learn more about Dan and his career, but also talk strategy and learn more about fantasy football. Dan, I wanted to also say that I've listened to you for a number of years. I won't say how many, but really appreciate your top of the charts when it comes to knowledge. Also love your style. You're very easygoing and very professional, and it's really a super honor to have you come in and join us tonight. So, Dan, welcome to the show, and how are you doing tonight?
Oh, well, first of all, the honor's all mine, Rick and Joe, for being part of your guys' show. And gosh, Rick, I know you've been, I don't know how long you've been listening either. It seems like a long time, but just wrapped up my 13th season on as the host of Fantastics, the actual website I work for, Fantastics Insider Football with my buddy James Adams. We've done it 11 of the last 13 years together. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. My favorite part of it, though, is getting to meet guys like you and all the people out there, not just listening, but playing. I mean, the fantasy industry, really just a special place to be.
Well, I know we're going to talk more fantasy football as we get a little bit further along in the show, but first, I'd like to be able to let folks in the audience know a little bit more about you. So, why don't you tell us where you're from and what you do inside and outside of fantasy football?
Yeah, that's great. So I grew up, born and raised here in northern Kentucky, 5 minutes south of where the Bengals play football in Cincinnati. So, a Cincinnati sports fan my entire life. I was actually born in 1975. So every first 2 years of my life, every picture I have, I'm in wearing some sort of Cincinnati Reds something. My parents were huge sports fans. And, as a young kid, I got to watch the Reds win a World Series, the Bengals play in 2 Super Bowls. It was a great place to be. It hasn't really happened that much as an adult per se, but outside of my fantasy football stuff, I mean, I've been in digital marketing. My first challenge I tackled, I always joke, was Y2K, and here I am 25 years later, and currently. After being an entrepreneur and running my own business, very much around fantasy sports, which we'll talk a little bit about, the last 10 years, I've been worked with Disabled American Veterans, DAV, obviously one of the largest veteran organizations out there. We help 1 million veterans every year and their families through our free programs and services. I serve as the director of direct marketing there. So I'm on the fundraising team. And what a great job to be able to go to work every day and help those that gave up so much so we can do fun things like play fantasy football here, fellas.
Definitely. And you mentioned you've been on, at least you've been with the Fantastics doing work with that for 13 years. But how long ago did you start playing fantasy football?
Yeah, well, I just turned the big 50. So I actually started fantasy when I was 15 years old, football wise. A year or two before that, we would do baseball, which we would literally score by hand on like what were spreadsheets, but ones we made with rulers, subtracting previous week stats down. And so I started playing 1990. That was, by hand, and then high school. It carried on through college. Got online in the late 90s once the internet became. That was really when it really started changing, fellas. And ironically, wouldn't be much longer after that I'd start my own fantasy website, my own fantasy business, and being in the industry and as a paid professional now for over 2 decades. It was I was an early adopter to say the least. But I will say, I joke back to you talk about when I started. I would score it in second period. I always tell Miss Wonderling and my computer teacher at the time, we were learning DOS programming. It was like 10 start run and this on these computers with green screens. And I used to score the fantasy games in there with the USA Today's every Tuesday morning. And Miss Wonderling, after about week 4, start catching on, and I got the tension and a couple times. And by mid-season, my mom was on my butt, and she was like, "Oh, you better be paying attention in this class. If that's what's gonna be your future. You're never gonna make a penny in that stupid fantasy football stuff." And here I am all these years later, getting paid to talk about football. And God rest my mother's soul. She's been gone for a number of years now, but I like to think of that story, and it just really wish she could have saw what ended up happening. But either way, it's been a long time, fellas. It's been a long time.
Well, and I'm guessing you play fantasy football. How many leagues are you currently in?
I've really cut back on the season long in recent years, just from a straight enjoyment. And it's mostly the waiver wires. But, there's a few leagues we play in that are free leagues, like, with serious hosts and different things. And I mean, I care about those leagues, but actually paid leagues that I actually pay money and play out, it's down to about 8 or less. I mean, and it's pretty enjoyable amount. I think at my peak, I was in the 30s and 40s, but honestly, with the best ball format, with legalized sports gambling, and just my love of just football in general, I think I'm pretty tapped out there. What about you guys? How many leagues you guys play in?
About
check.
15. I do about 15.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about increasing it. They're managed teams, 15.
Yeah, there was a year where I actually had one of my interns manage my waiver wire. I gave him my rankings, and it didn't work out as I hoped. I had to fire the guy like halfway through for his messing up something. Now I'm just teasing. I didn't fire him, but he did sort of suck at it, and so I've got away from that approach. But it's a lot to handle. What about you, Rick?
It is. At one point, I was up to 25 managed. Now, we don't even count best ball leagues. Got down to about 10 or 11, and it's creeping back up. I seem to get into more of the charity leagues, and so I'm trying to at least focus my energies and attentions to those.
Hey, everybody should do as much as they're able to still enjoy, right? And even for those who only do a league or two. I mean, we're happy to have those people who love fantasy football too, because fantasy to me is just about really camaraderie and a lot of fun. But I will say this, no matter how many leagues you play in, I think you should play in as many different formats as right. I don't want to play in 10 leagues and have them all be 10, 12 team PPRs, just basic stuff. Like, mix it up a little bit. There's a lot of fun ways to play fantasy football these days. Don't be afraid to try new things here.
Great advice. In fact, I try to play in IDP leagues. I like being both sides of the ball and getting a chance to, look at, where players on the defensive side are helping, teams win. So
IDP is not for the lighthearted though. I mean, it's a commitment. It's a commitment. And some of these leagues, they dip their toes in IDP, which I mean, when the player pool's so deep and you only use a player or two. I mean, there's a lot of things, but I have one IDP league, so I do enjoy it. For sure.
Well, what got you into the content side of fantasy football?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, as I mentioned, I played. It was what actually started it out is I was working for a software company and started learning and teaching myself how to design web pages. And this was in like early 2000s. And essentially, I ran across at that time they were starting to run fantasy leagues. And if you played back then, and CBS Sports Line was a big one. I mean, you're paying $1.50. Plus $100 to $150 to run your league. I found a company that was licensing their software for me to put my own logos on. Fanstar was the name of it. Actually, they existed for a number of years. But basically, I could repurpose leagues and get paid $20. So the funny story was, I signed up for the software. I was like, heck, I already been running 5 leagues. If nothing else, I'll do this. And I created this web page. I start putting rankings out there, and when I'd write articles, I think I had like 4 visitors a day for the first month, and that was counting my wife. But every day I'd put up articles, I'd put up the thing. I got this software. Well, as luck would have it, I got the chance to go on in August of 2003 here locally. Lance McAllister, still a dear friend, still the king of talk radio in Cincinnati on 700 WLW, the big one. Well, back then he invited me in for a trial run on a fantasy segment I was a regular listener. He's like, "Does anybody got an idea for a fantasy segment?" And I've emailed him this email, and I was like, "Lance, here it was like 17 paragraphs and of all the reasons." Long story short, he brings me in for a trial. The phone boards light up. I did pretty good on that trial, and by the end of the trial, I had 69 leagues sign up for my software that I had yet to even set up a league of my own in. And I had to support this stuff. I was like, holy cow, how'd this happen? So getsportsinfo.com. I launched it in June of 2003. And through it, there was a lot of evolution. I was one of the first 100 members of the Fantasy Sports Trade Association, went to some of those early trade shows and got to meet some really cool people that are still in the industry, guys like Greg Ambrosius and some of the others. But the thing is once ESPN Yahoo went free, that business model sort of flaked, and we started pivoting that business into different things. But what actually ended up happening is we took those fantasy games to sports bars and got them to run our games, but they needed websites. So by accident, we started up having all these websites and running email marketing and all these fantasy games in bars. And it was pretty interesting, but it led to me being quite the digital marketer and part of the story. But I stayed in it with in the fantasy industry, as I said, hosting on Sirius now for 13 years. And the Lance McAllister radio segment, I just wrapped up my 22nd season of going on Thursday afternoons here in Cincinnati at 4:45. Now with Mo Egger and still with Lance at night, but quite a run, fellas, quite a run getting to do that, and it's been a lot of fun.
And is that where people can find your writing? Is getsportsinfo.com?
Well, yes, and sort of no. I haven't really got to the point where I'm putting it all out there, but I'm sort of phasing Get Sports Info out of the portfolio here a little bit and sunsetting. I did rankings there for 19 years and published them, not time to pat my own back, but over a 5-year period, I was in the top 10 in the fantasy industry there for a stretch. With some of my buddies like Jeff Ratcliffe and some of those other dudes. But, I stopped doing the rankings a few years ago, sort of been phasing out. I got a big job at DAV and I do enjoy the show, and I enjoy playing. So a lot of that. Plus, I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on Do Good Fantasy, which actually brings all my favorite things together. And which essentially, Rick, you mentioned charity leagues, but through SiriusXM and our listener league, James and I could never have enough spots for listeners. So we started doing one to help DAV, who I work for, help disabled veterans, and through best balls and all that, we've raised over $50,000 to help disabled veterans. And as somebody that's actually met hundreds and hundreds of them that DAV has been able to help, I mean, it is really cool to see, get to meet and play against listeners and also help our heroes. And so that's pretty cool. I'm going to be doing a little bit more of that and focusing just a little bit more on other parts of my life here, but still going to be on Sirius, still going to be talking football, and hopefully still jumping on some of these podcasts like this one.
Nice. And Joe, you had a question?
Dan, no, he mentioned, Dan, you mentioned Greg Ambrosius, so now I got to ask you, do you play on the NFFC at all?
I have. I'm not a big high stakes guy, so I'm not in I've obviously played on some of their formats, but no, Greg was actually the president way back then. And
when it was baseball, right? When it
was very helpful.
Yeah.
And,
Nice.
Obviously he's been a guy we've had on our show. I love talking the Packers with Greg and Tom and all those guys. I'm big fans of what they do.
Yeah, right. Tom was a former beat writer, right, for the Packers, I believe.
Is that the case? I've known Tom very. I mean, I know him. We interact, but I don't know a lot about his background. I sure do enjoy their takes, though. And
I met him. I met him last year. I did a live draft in New York. And,
how was that?
That was fun. It was very
live events are a great part to be.
Intense. It was intense. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's like those drafts go a little quick too. So
speaking of live drafts, and Scott Fishbowl is probably top of mind when we talk about live drafts. So are you involved in the Scott Fishbowl?
Oh, heck yeah.
You do the live drafts in Cincinnati? Or
I've been to the last couple, and they just announced the date, June 22nd. So my guy, John Bosch, who is a big part of the help there with Fantasy Cares and working with Scott Fish and the team, they're putting on a big event. I've actually got to do it each of the last 2 years here, and quite a time. Unfortunately, and they just put the date out, and I just now realized this yesterday. It contradicts with a vacation. I'm already going to be at the beach, and things are already booked. And
no!
As sad as I am to miss the live event, and I really am sad, I will be enjoying my time down in Hilton Head, where I'll be with the family and even taking the dog on the beach trip this year. So I'm it's the last big family hoorah before I give up my weekends to fantasy football on the radio again.
Yeah, I'm organizing the Houston live draft, and I know JC is going to be organizing the Minneapolis live draft. And I announced the
That's
date, the
awesome.
venue, and of course, I've got a couple people already saying, "Gee, I'm not going to be able to do it. Family plans or something else coming up." So
Yes. Well, it is
kind of
summertime, and
extra.
my
Yeah.
daughter plays volleyball. So between my radio show and her volleyball, there's like a 15-day window. But I am looking forward to the other dates going out. Who knows? Maybe I go to Nashville or some of these other places. But if not, I'll be online and take another chance of really messing up a draft with all the messed up rules that screw with my brain.
Well, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about football, but you mentioned your daughter and volleyball. Can you tell us a little bit about your family? And I've seen
for
pictures
sure.
of your daughter, so I know I've seen her. So
I only have one child, and she is definitely somebody that she's got me as her dad, so she doesn't have a choice but to sort of like football. And we are Bengal fans, Bengal season ticket holders, so we go to every game. That's actually one of the reasons I stopped doing my rankings when I renewed my season tickets, was to take my Sundays off again.
there you go.
Just worry about my 8 lineups instead of trying to update all these rankings and answer all these questions. And it's been a blessing. And my wife, Kelly, who I've been married to for 25 years next year. So she actually, when I started the site Get Sports Info, she started a female version of our Couch Potato Football. Miss Couch Potato Football is the commissioner.
Wow,
and they
nice.
just celebrated their 22nd season.
Awesome.
And you want to talk about some ladies that can talk some smack. I mean, they are intense, and but no, they've got a great core, and it's just really been a lot of when I first met her, she didn't even like sports, and now she's beating my butt in pro pick'ems and everything else. So it's definitely you got to be careful what you create sometimes, fellas, because when they start beating you regularly, then it's a problem.
But still a lot of fun when your family is involved. My wife doesn't play fantasy football, and neither of my 2 daughters play yet, but one of them seems to be growing interest if there can be some sort of a father-daughter league that she can join me at. So
I love it. I love it.
You mentioned the Bengals, and I think we all know you're a very you're wearing a Cincy hat. So kind of curious, what are your thoughts for the team this year? What are your expectations for the team in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, my expectations are pretty high. I mean, as they were a year ago. I mean, obviously the defense was brutal last year. And I mean, there's been a lot of scrutiny over some of the way that things have happened as an offseason. But from my perspective, I'm pretty happy. They've checked a lot of things off my box. And frankly, I mean, even as disappointing as it was last year on the defensive side, here's a team that lost 8 games by less than 4 points or less. I mean, these aren't blowouts. They had a lot there. I think there's a lot of regression of some bad luck too that went their way. Anytime you got number 9 as your quarterback, you can beat anybody on any given Sunday. And that's just the bottom line. I mean, in my opinion, maybe not in fantasy, Joe Burrow, if not the top quarterback in the league, certainly in the same tier as whoever you would argue against.
He is the best. I'll argue he's the best right now.
And you add in having perhaps the best receiver, not just in the league now, but perhaps in recent memory, in Jamar Chase. I think it's pretty special. Those two, the chemistry they have. I was on the pro T Higgins thing. I saw the signs last year at the end of the season, at each game, even on the road in Tennessee, the way that they walked out as the 3 captains. I mean, that's what they wanted. Trey Hendrickson's in the news right now, but dude, Trey Hendrickson's under contract next year. So the Bengals were never going to trade Trey Hendrickson. I personally think in the national media, especially, there's a lot of Bengal haters out there. And I love it because that's the type of stuff Joe plays off of. But the team has some holes. I mean, they are very weak at guard right now. Even if they do bring Hendrickson back, as I expect, they still need a little bit more up front on the defensive line. I'm a big fan of the change at defensive coordinator. I like Lou Anarumo, but I think going back to Golden's going to make a big difference here. And I mean, they've had a couple non-splash signings that were big fills here. DJ Slayton is, comes in from Green Bay as a really good run-stopping defensive tackle. They re-signed BJ Hill and Joseph Asai, 2 young linemen that I did think have upside. And we got probably, this Oren Burks that comes in here is probably the best free agent signing. And I don't expect Jermaine Pratt to be a Bengal by the time the season starts. So I think he's starting, and it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I mean, the division is tough. The schedule's tougher than it was a year ago. And, I think in the AFC in general, outside, I mean, the Ravens are probably the team that would worry me the most. The Bengals and Chiefs are, play pretty good games, but gosh, guys, I could go back to so many Bengals games last year and tell you one thing that it would have went different. I mean, the Kansas City game, we just talked about the Chiefs. They had that game won. The call that was called against them, they even give them a chance to continue that game, and that's just one. But I'm excited. I think in fantasy, I'm stacking Bengals as much as possible in best balls and such, because no matter what you believe of them and their defense and their ability,
the offense,
I think they showed last year that they can score with anybody in the football league.
And what are you thinking about for the draft? Is there a player you're thinking that they're targeting or that you'd like for them to target?
Well, I definitely think that they probably will go offensive line there. But I do think there's a couple positions. What they don't need to do is draft for need. I do think this is a team that's going to take the best player on the board, even if it's not what they want. They do have a history of that. So we'll see. I mean, when you pick in the middle like they do, not as interesting, but I'm excited. This is going to be my first time going to the NFL draft this year. I'm going just as a fan. I've never been to Lambeau Field either. So I'm going to be there for the first 2 days, and that's going to be super cool. But I am honestly, from the draft's perspective, I mean, yes, the Bengals probably, I don't think they get any fantasy contributors in those first couple of days. So I think it's D-line, maybe another edge rusher, certainly some help there on the guard. But I'm really see where all these running backs are going to go in this draft. And there's several of them I think can make a pretty instant splash. Yeah. And as you guys know, landing spot is everything.
I saw a comment from JC about Gesicki and, as a tight end re-signing. What are your thoughts also on Alt?
Well, it was very crushing to see. I was actually at the game where he got injured, and my seats where they're located are right about the yard line where it happened. And pretty good. But, I mean, as he went to the ground, my stomach, I knew instantly. And that's disappointing. But Gesicki came in. I mean, the Bengals have had these one-year tight ends, and most of them have actually worked out to be fairly productive. Hayden Hurst had one of his best seasons as a Bengal. CJ Uzama was a big guy. The reason they got to the Super Bowl didn't work out as good with Irv Smith Jr., but Gesicki was a guy that 66 receptions last year. I think there's opportunities for him to grow. You talk about who the team's wide receiver 3 is, and it's him. That's the answer. At least as it stands now in my eyes. I mean, I do like Andre Yosivas, Jermaine Burton. He might not even make the team. Last year's third-round pick was, a no-show late in the season and not a guy that the team really thinks that they can count on. What's, to me, is extremely interesting and something that, fantasy managers aren't really thinking about right now from the Bengals offseason as far as the return of Samaje Perine. He didn't really have a huge role with the Chiefs, but proved to be a valuable part of the mix there. As they went down it. But this is a guy that knows the system. Him and Joe Mixon pretty much the same age when they were played together. But he's going to come in here, and for Chase Brown, the workload might go down a little bit. The explosiveness is still there. So I still think Chase Brown's got at least back-end RB1 upside. But Samaje Perine is a pass blocker, is a third down back, is a change of pace guy, is a veteran presence in this locker room, is a guy that already knows the coaching team, knows the community. I was extremely excited for them to get the value they got in bringing him back, but I still expect them to maybe draft another running back, maybe a bigger dude to sort of complement Brown, more of an, when you want to pound the rock type of thing, but I don't think you're going to see that till day 3. I think this is a deep enough class. The Bengals enter the draft with one less pick than most teams as they traded, I believe, the 6th-round pick last year for Khalil Herbert after they lost Zach Moss for the season. And Moss, of course, he's not expected to return here, so who knows where he'll land and what fantasy value he might possess.
Well, that's great. And we're kind of getting into the more of the fantasy football type discussion. And I guess we'd be remiss if we didn't comment on the big news of the day, which was, the trade between the New England Patriots and the Dallas Cowboys. And since we do happen to have a Patriot fan, why don't I toss it over to Joe and we can talk about the trade and maybe his thoughts on it and get your thoughts on it as well.
All right, I'll give you some thoughts. I'm not, as a fan. I mean, as a Patriots guy, I don't like the return they got. But I guess they were just moving on from him, and they kind of let him determine the landing spot based on the offers that they had. So they just took what they just took what it was, and they basically just did a 7th round, 5th round swap. They didn't add any extra draft picks. It's just a swap. My thoughts are, as far as Dak is concerned, I think he's fine. I don't think Milton is a threat to take his job. A trade could happen, but like you pointed out when we were talking earlier, Rick, he's got a no trade clause, and they just restructured his contract to give him a big signing bonus and make some room. So I don't think he's going anywhere this year.
Yeah, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think it's like $150 million they got to eat to actually trade Dak. So that's definitely not happening. I mean, I'm not going to act like I've watched Joe Milton play a lot of football. I mean, I've seen a bit of him in the preseason and such. And I think here's a guy that, is probably a decent type of backup because he does have that upside. And he's certainly no threat to Dak. I would agree with that. I think the interesting part here, the guy that he's replacing, Cooper Rush, leaving Dallas to go to Baltimore there. Which is interesting because when you got a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who's so unique and gifted in ways, when you have a backup and your football team sets up an offense, I mean, that's why it worked with Tyler Huntley for as many years as a decent backup because he could sort of play the same style. If Lamar Jackson goes down and Cooper Rush enters the contest, that playbook's going to have to look a little different. And but overall, I mean, getting 2 picks of value seems like a great spot. And, as a Patriots fan here like Joe, I mean, goodness gracious, to see what you saw out of Drake May, you're feeling pretty good at quarterback right now. And I'm buying Drake May and his stock. I mean, season long, maybe it's still a year or two before he really makes a splash. But I think from last year's class, Jaden Daniels obviously had a pretty epic season. So it's going to be hard to put him above him. But I think he's got a ceiling that's pretty freaking high, and maybe outside of Daniels, the next best thing.
Yeah, I guess
they gotta get him some weapons.
Weapons are important. I do like how they've beefed up both offensive, defensive line. I still really think Ramondre Stevenson's going to be great. But dude, the biggest additions they made to this offseason is the coaching staff, and getting these experienced guys in there, and I really like the direction the Patriots are going as a football team right now.
Yeah. And you already mentioned Oren Burks as a signing. So that, again, strengthens the Bengals defense. There really wasn't any other offensive free agent moves as the resident Texan fan here in the area. The Texans did get EJ Speed as a linebacker, and IDP people probably are the only ones.
Oh, dude, I told you I played in one league. He was my stud linebacker last year.
Yeah,
best dollar bid I made all auction.
142 tackles last year. Where I see it, especially as a Texan fan, is any chance you can add a player and hurt a division rival at the same time. It's like a double tap. And so,
they did it at receiver too. They did it at receiver too with Christian Kirk, right? I mean, cap casualty. I think that's a big ad there. I love the fact that they did that on defense, though, because speed does shore up that linebacker spot. And, with the pressure they can put on with the guys they got up front, that Texans defense is legit.
Real tough, yes.
We'll see what the offense looks like. Stroud obviously took a step back as a sophomore. I still believe in the guy. I love Nico Collins. Tank Dell being injured is a big buzzkill. I don't expect that to go away. But, Christian Kirk is a nice upgrade there if he can stay healthy. But I was sort of hoping Diggs would land back there, but, they didn't have the money or, they wouldn't invest the money he was looking for. But he ends up with your team, Joe. So, speaking of Diggs, while we're just randomly shooting through the team here, like, I'm buying into Diggs with some back. I mean, he's getting old. He's getting up there. But in PPR, like this guy's got back end wide receiver 2 upside to me right now. Like I've got it. I picked him up in a couple keeper leagues late last year for nothing. And it's like, I think he's worth, I mean, I'm not going to overpay for him or anything, but
No.
like if he's your wide receiver 3 or flex in PPR as you're heading into the season, if
Pretty
dude stays healthy, that's going to be a nice spot.
Yeah.
Is definitely give you that kind of the flex. Like anytime you can get a team's number 1 wide receiver as late as he's going in the
Yes.
draft right now, it's
With a
always
young
gonna-
quarterback like Drake May, and he's going to be working out of that slot. They're going to move him around a little bit. I mean, again, I'm not trying to I think he can get inside the top 25 in PPR if he stays healthy.
Yeah.
And that's a guy that I see a lot of people ranking it after the signing, a couple of things, different sites I was looking at, they're still got him in the late 30s and 40s. I haven't adjusted my rankings. I will before the draft. I start ranking my players like week 17 of the previous season. But Diggs is moving up for me at landing there, and the promising outlook on his recovery right now. A lot of injured receivers, right? That's what I'm looking at. Like we talked about that. I got Rashee Rice, Chris Godwin. There's a lot of these guys that are coming off these injuries, and man, I don't like stacking too many injury guys, but I mean, in each of those instances, everything's sounding good right now, and we're not even past the draft, so it's all good signs, and could be good value in early best balls.
And speaking of Diggs, I remember, or at least I know a lot of folks who are considering him kind of a prima donna, hard to get along with.
Yes.
I know that the first couple of games with the Texans, he played strong. And even after the injury, he was a pretty decent person on the sideline. I think he was working with, the younger receivers and trying to, be kind of that good team player.
Well, I mean, most receivers are sort of divas, in my opinion. It's only when they lose that it becomes a problem, right? I mean, nobody's as crazy as like Antonio Brown. I mean, he's his whole own level of crazy, right? I mean, as a Patriots fan, you would agree, right? But like, seriously, Diggs, I mean, I think he's still got a little left, is all I'm saying. Is he ever going to be what he was? No, I don't think so. And again, I'm not going to get overexposed on the guy, but it is interesting. He went from your team to your team. So a good player to talk about. And one I'm interested to see, what do you guys think about in fantasy? Am I crazy?
Yeah, no, I like him, but what I like too is Keyshawn Boutte. He's draftable because Diggs is there. I think Diggs is going to help what he does, and he could be a bit of a deep sleeper. I've been taking some mixing in shares of him in the late round.
I'll add that to my best ball stash list as well, there, Joe.
I'd also be curious about how perhaps Bulk and Baker, the last year, both were non-existent, but there was a lot of buzz coming, as they were being drafted. And especially Baker, surprisingly, so more than Bulk.
Well, you got my former Bengal, Joe Mixon, and I'm a big Joe Mixon fan. Joe Mixon, I mean, he's good in locker room. He got off to a great start. He cooled off last year. I will say, Mixon's a guy. I think it's not going to end as start as. I don't think it's going to be as good as it was at the beginning of last season. So,
but they also have Damian Pierce is backing him up, and again, he wasn't. As good as they thought that first year, but he's a decent backup. And plus, as you mentioned already, this is a deep running back class. So they could always pick up somebody late in the draft, as a developmental player. And, we'll see. I think their running game is going to be pretty decent again this year.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Joe, why don't we sort of get into the more of the advice and strategy part? And I know that, you've been looking at this a lot. So why don't we go ahead and, pass the ball over to you?
All right. So Dan, you mentioned earlier, you start your rankings. I heard you said you start your rankings in week 17 prior season. So I'm always curious to ask people about their process when it comes to preparing for the upcoming season. And obviously you start right away. I'm kind of the same way. That's why. And I like to figure it all. I like to have it all out, like a good, like something like not setting foundation, but like a little foundation of how I feel, and then add to it. So,
I agree.
And then find time to take time off from the deep diving and stuff like that. Try to get all that stuff out of the way as soon as possible, so it's already in your mind, and just go from there. So I mean, let me. So you can go ahead, answer the question. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of
kinda
this prep,
fumble my
absolutely. I think you're spot on. How I approach it too, Joe, is the sense of, I mean, part of my prep actually is because once week 17 ends, we still got to do a Sirius XM show all the way to the Super Bowl. And if I go to two, often two a weekend. So I've turned my off-season prep personally into also some great radio content, hopefully. But no, I think I say every year on the radio as the season winds down, it's like, even if you just start with the top 10 or 20 or whatever, just it's fresh in your mind then. So go ahead, and if just ranking as they were in week 17, if you were starting with the draft as the season comes to an end, go ahead and start your rankings, and then you tweak them as things go on, right? And being part of the channel there, we're doing our first mock drafts before we even get off there. I actually got to, every year I usually get to be in one on the channel with some of the other guys. So it's like, you don't see anybody, there's no rankings out there. You don't even really have your own thing. And it's always an interesting exercise, and it's fun, and it's just for mocks, but it's great. But, not just that, but, just notes in general as the season ends. I tell commissioners, I was like, man, you're never going to remember those rule changes you wanted to make come August that you're thinking about right now. Just start your process then, and then you evolve. So for me, I don't really get into obviously projections and such until the rosters are pretty much set. So most of my rankings are more of just like, all right, this is how I would literally, I'm just, when I'm talking about week 17 rankings, I'm literally just ranking them based off of just nothing but my thought. But no, I update the rankings throughout the playoffs. Once the playoffs are over, I do them again right before free agency starts. Once free agency is over, I'll do them again before the draft. Once the NFL draft's over, I'll update them. And then once I get to sort of that core consensus, then I'll start really putting in, I've got some different modules. Obviously, our Fantastics tool is pretty fantastic as well. But as we start putting some of those things in there, and really, that's when you really start projecting. And then my rankings that were just the rankings in my thought that sort of get me through best ball startup season and all these mock drafts, then they really start to shake things up, because information, you're putting more things in there, really projecting out the games. And one of the things about the Fantastics tool I love is literally, not that those are all my projections or anything like that. And Frank, none of them are my projections, but I use the similar model. But the thing is we project out literally every single game, every single stat for the entire season. And that process is, based off all these algorithms and different things. But that gives you a baseline. But I don't live off projections alone. I still go off my gut,
Right.
and even my rankings, what I rank and publish might not be the same things I draft by. And it's not because I draft differently. It's because, I'm not a slave to the rankings. If I might project a running back to be number 21 on my board, but there's a guy at 26 that I really think is a bit more of a risk. That, this guy is somebody I'd rather go another way and get this guy a little later, because I think the upside's there. So I rank based off of the way I think they're going to finish, but I draft more off of, a mixture. I definitely like to have a mix, right? And you got to take, if you want a guy, you got to reach, man. And even if you don't rank him ahead of, I hear people say, well, I'm going to stick right to my rankings, and I get it.
Guy.
Once it gets to that point in the draft, the ADP is kind of out the window, and you got to get your guy at that point. If you want your guy, know your spot in the draft. If you know he ain't going to be there when it comes back around,
ADP is really what everybody else is doing. But what I'm saying is, and I'm with you, like you jump a few rounds in ADP, but even on my own rankings, I might have a guy that, and that's the thing. I mean, when you roster construction, and as you talk about strategy, is something that I like to have a balance of. I want to have upside guys. I want to have safe guys. Every year there's a guy in my league. He'll draft all the injury risk guys. And then about week 5, he's like, oh, I got the worst luck. Like, you don't have the worst luck. You've drafted half your team. These dudes are hurt or coming off major injury or have a history of injury. That's not bad luck. That's bad strategy. So anyway, you guys are getting me all fired up here all of a sudden. I don't want to get all fired up, but
I mentioned ADP and set him off. That's it.
ADP, man, ADP.
No, I don't mean 2 rounds. You know what I mean?
I'm not real. I'm excited in a good way here, to be clear.
Yeah. All right. So you just basically told us your base. Yeah, so you answered that question. How much do you value elite quarterbacks and the elite tight ends in a draft?
I always just like to play the board, frankly. Yeah. I
Yep.
mean, in best ball drafts, especially, I mean, goodness, it's about a portfolio of a roster, really, when I approach it. But I'm in so few season longs that I don't go in to a redraft league where every player is available and say, oh my gosh, like I'm going to take a quarterback here and a quarterback there. Overall, I will say roster construction, tight end, I believe, is a little bit more of a premium I'm willing to pay as we look at 2025. I think we've got about 3 or 4 guys up there, one of which got paid big bucks today, and Trey McBride. But the thing is like I'm more willing to invest in an early tight end, I think, than a quarterback because, I mean, unless you're in a super flex, which I do enjoy playing super flex because that to me brings the value back to quarterback position. But at the end of the day, it's like, even if I got Josh Allen, I don't think it's that much of a difference waiting a little bit longer and end up with Joe Burrow or, whoever's your 5th or 6th quarterback. So I want running backs. I think you got to have it. I know it changes every year and receivers are going to go off the board in a flurry. But if you have a true elite, healthy running back that you can count, I want at least one of them. And it's hard to find them. And, you don't know who they're going to be every year. So for me, I'm excited what lies ahead with this rookie running back class because I think there could be a lot of value present itself, not just with those, but maybe even people overpaying for those guys. And now you're getting the veterans on the teams where they're drafted that might actually be falling even deeper than they would have before. So it's the draft's going to really change the running back landscape, but I'm never going to be a no running back guy. I'm always going to get me at least one running back in those first few rounds in just about any draft I'm in.
Nice. Do you stack if it like presents itself? Do you
in a high stakes league or a best ball? Yes. Or a DFS contest or something like that. In my season long hometown leagues, it's 12 team leagues. I mean, I'm not going to avoid a stack. I'm certainly not going to go out of my way to get one. It's nice if you got a good one, right? And we talk about how long I've been playing fantasy football, dude. My early day stack in my first couple years of football in the fantasy space, I had Jim Kelly and Andre Reed, which
nice.
Back then it was 12-point play, and it was like, oh my gosh, every time they threw one, it was. And I was a Bengal fan, and back then they were sort of going against the Bills a little bit, and after the Bills ripped off Sam Weich's no huddle offense, and essentially, or hurry up offense, I should say, not the you guys know what I'm talking about with the Bengals when they had the hurry up offense. The Bills end up going to 4 Super Bowls with it, but either way, it's a old school reference. But yes is the answer.
Nice. So I had one back in the day too. For me, it was Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison. I had it the second year.
That's a really good stack.
That was a good one. Oh yeah, there were games. There was one game where Peyton had 4 touchdowns and Harrison had 3. I was like, this is great.
Oh yeah. And that's just it. I mean, if it's an elite offense, you're gonna start players. I'll tell you one thing I don't like to have is a running back and like my RB1 and my wide receiver 1 to be from the same team in season long leagues.
That makes total sense.
You're betting against yourself, yeah.
I mean, I don't mind it as much if it's like my wide receiver 3 or my RB2 or something. I mean, but I do like a little diversity.
What if it's Gibbs and Sun God?
There's exceptions to every rule. Actually, there was one of my favorite home leagues I play in each year. One of the teams that finished second place, I think, he had Montgomery and Gibbs as his starting running backs most of the season. So 2 running backs from the same team, and I was like, that's never going to work. And then somehow he got to like the Super Bowl. He smoked me the week I played him. I'm like, okay, maybe your idea works, but try it again. I think that's a key thing right there too, fellas, is like, I have a process. It's not always right. Yeah. I'm going to have some real crappy teams and do things, but I pretty much, since I do it the same way in fantasy as I do in gambling football, but I'm consistent on how I do it. And I think that's important for people is it sounds simple, and this isn't fantasy football or life, but at the end of the day, you do something, you find something that works. Once it works, you keep doing it. And then you rinse and repeat, right? It's like the problem is, we try all these different things, and there's people, especially in gambling, you'll see it. It's like, oh man, they get up or they get down, then they change their patterns and how they do it. And next thing you know, it's like, boom, you blew it. Because consistency is what I've learned over time in all of these things is really how you beat the book or how you win the league. Or at least, in some cases, it's not about winning the league. It's about turning a little bit of a profit. Even if you do it for fun, you don't want to lose all the leagues. You want to at least, anybody that's in 8-10 leagues, they're going to want to win a little money or break even, right? I mean, but
yeah. And you'd mentioned zero RB, and it's not something you've tried doing. And it seemed like those people that were really focused on zero RB the last year had a little bit harder time because so many of the wide receivers were hurt. And you mentioned a couple of those wide receivers.
And here's the thing. I think any strategy can work, to be clear. No matter your strategy, you got to hit it right? And I think last year why the zero RB guys really came up short wasn't necessarily because of anything they did. It was because no real running backs injured themselves. What running back did you pick up off the waiver wire last year that was significantly impactful in fantasy? There weren't many, right? Usually that's not the case. I mean, I've been playing this game as long as you guys. You've seen how many years we see just random dudes come out of nowhere. And I mean, there wasn't that waiver wire running back. And listen, I'm not saying my co-host James Adams, I always joke he gets wide receiver drunk in every draft he's in because it's all white stickers, man, or whatever color the receivers are. It's like, oh, and he is very successful. But even James will pluck a running back in there before at least the first four. I mean, it just gets real slim. You got to hit it right. Every round you wait on any position, you really force yourself into getting into a position. And like people, they want to wait on quarterbacks. And I know I said I wouldn't go after one too early in the draft. What I love is when everybody waits on quarterback and I'm able to get my QB3 in round 6 or 7, because that is a lot different than you saying, do you want to draft a top 3 quarterback? Because it's all about where they fall. And I'll draft any player at a certain point of the draft becomes valuable. So I love getting in leagues, whether it's high stakes leagues. It happens all the time in the Sirius XM host league. The first quarterback doesn't even go off the board like round 5. I'm like, oh, heck yeah, dude. I'm stacked and I'm getting Jalen Hurts in round 6. This is beautiful.
And I actually did have one last question regarding, and you mentioned the Sirius XM league, and I know it must be a different type of draft when you're going up against people like yourself who, this is their living and they follow the thing so closely. Do you find that it changes the way you draft, or does it change kind of like your approach? Or
honestly, I'll be honest, Rick. I mean, every draft I get in is sharp people, man. Whether it's the listener league I play in with, 96 of our listeners, these do good fantasy drafts. The Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. It's a live event that regionally I participated in here for about 10 years. Any of those high stakes leagues, those things are way more intense than a Sirius XM host draft. I think what's cool about the host drafts more than anything is talking smack when you actually win one to somebody. But I think I do approach it differently only because I've done enough of them to know how they all draft. And, and I sort of feel the same way with some of these high stakes leagues I get. And even my hometown league, I might go into differently because you have to know your league, man. It's like playing poker. You got to know who you're at the table with. So from that regard, it's cool playing against. I have all the respect in the world for everybody out there on the channel, but some of these listener leagues that I play in with the people in our listener league, gosh, those are much harder leagues because on draft night, it's cool going against John Hanson or whatever you want. But, in terms of hitting the waiver wire and being persistent, in these listener leagues, I wake up an hour after waivers ran and shit, 10 of the dudes have already picked up 4 guys. They're really on top of it. And, you don't win a league on draft night. You win a league by grinding. And, the listener league is the easiest league to win because, not everybody's equally as involved, especially, and to be honest, when I play in a free league at some point, as you're going through your 27 lineup changes or whatever it is, it's like, my focus usually goes to where my money is more often than not, if I was being truthful.
Nice. So you're from Kentucky. Do you know Joey Brown? Are you familiar with the name Joey Brown?
I am not. I'm not.
He plays in that tournament. I don't know if he does the live one though. I think he does. He might just do the online. I don't know if it's online at all, but he plays. He plays on the NFFC. He's a good friend of mine. I just figured I'd ask you because.
Well, it sounds like a cool dude. I should know.
Yeah. He's on X. He's on X.
I'll look him up.
At 12 Brown. I'll give him a shout out.
All right, there we go. At 12 Brown.
There it is.
No, dude. Just getting to meet people. That's my favorite part.
Yeah,
that's my.
This is what
come
this
on
is
with
what
you
I,
guys.
This is what I love about the show, man.
Yeah,
this is my favorite part. I get to meet everybody. You know what I mean? I don't know everybody, so this is great.
Yes. Well, it's definitely good to be here. And, we will be back for Fantastics Insider Football. So actually about 3 months from today, July the 5th is our return as traditional stuff there. So I will not be at the Fantasy Expo. So sorry, I'll miss you guys there. I wish I could get up to Canton. They do a great job. And hopefully we'll get back again next year. And so, dang, no Fantasy Expo, no live Scott Fishbowl. It's going to be a bummer of but I'm going to the NFL draft next month, and we got a lot of other fun things planned. So hopefully I'll see many of you in a draft room soon.
Are you going to report or write on what you see there? Is this going
to the draft? I mean, there could be some drunken tweets, Rick, but I am on. It is a personal pleasure. I'm actually going up with a good friend of mine, Mark Burgess. You plugged your friend, Joe, so I'm going to plug my friend. Mark Burgess actually is a Navy veteran himself. He's recently retired. He worked at DAV where he actually led our organization,
nice.
But he's been in just about every do good fantasy best ball I've been in since I started that stuff. But he's a fierce fantasy competitor, one of my favorite fantasy foes. And we're going to go up there and watch all the dudes get drafted and check out Lambeau Field for the first time. So, well, first time for me at least.
Well, before Joe closes us out, I know of a show that talks about charity leagues and charity events, and it's called the Give Back Show. And each week the fabulous host of that show highlights charity leagues and charity events. So maybe the two of us will be able to get together and have you talk more about the Do Good League that you're involved in, since
for sure. Yeah, as we get closer
great.
to the launch of the season, absolutely. As I said, we usually kick up stuff in May on that. Do Good Fantasy Best Balls. Military Appreciation Month is in May. So we start out with some Best Ball 10s. We'll be promoted. And actually, a lot of my Sirius XM hosts, they join a league. So you come play against me and guys like Howard Bender and Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey and a whole bunch of them. They'll all have their own leagues. And that will be where we started off. But yeah, definitely as the summer goes on, we got a lot more fun and our big listener league. But we're going to be doing some cool stuff there, but always happy to, get it out there and talk about it. So
awesome. Okay, Joe.
Well, Dan, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yes.
And talking. So I'll definitely, I'll definitely be paying attention to your follow and a little more, like getting a little bit more involved.
Awesome, brother. Happy to meet you as well, and looking forward to following you. And definitely, you guys keep up the good work here, and keep talking football. And gosh, the off season, it gets shorter every year. That's what I love about it. So,
all right, you want to tell the audience your X handle where they can find
definitely. X is pretty much the only platform I do the fantasy stuff on currently, and you can follow me over there at Dan Clasgens. Again, Fantastics, insiderfootball.com. That's the website where you can find our draft advisor during the season. We have great baseball tools as well, Insider Baseball, and then July 5th we'll be back on Sirius XM channel 87, their fantasy sports radio. So. Definitely hit me up. Talk fantasy on X. Love doing it. As the season gets closer, I might get out on some of the other things again. I know there's a lot of emerging platforms.
Absolutely. But, when it heats up, man, that's
the good stuff. So thanks a lot, fellas. I really appreciate it.
All right. Join us next Thursday at our regular time. Guest will be Brandon Lejeune, a wickedly smart rookie and Devi draft expert who is best known for the NFL Draft Big Board podcast. and big board database. Also, keep an eye out for the rest of the great shows on the Sports Affiliation. On Sundays, we have TSA Hoops show with JR. Rick already talked about Tuesday with his Give Back show. Carla, great interview show on Wednesday. She always has great guests, asks great questions, and it's always a great time. And then Thursday, you got us. Monday and Friday, Tuesday and Friday, I'm sorry, is draft. Me and JC have been doing Drafters After Dark, where we do a Drafters Best Ball draft, a $3 or a $10, either one, whichever one fills really. And we usually do 2 back to back, and we have a good time with it. We talk draft strategy, and it's a good time. So you can check that out. And that's it. Thank you for joining us. Rick?
Thanks. And thanks. Great meeting you. And JC, why don't you take us on out?